So the guys over on First Things First were asking themselves a question: how concerning is Lamar Jackson's injury? They had just gotten word about Lamar Jackson's toe after the 3 previous injury designations leading into this week. And so they kind of looked at his Lamar Jackson's first 5 games and his last 3 games. And Bobby, we've kind of alluded to it. We can all see it with our eyes, but these numbers really are eye-popping. He goes in a completion percentage from his first 5 games to 72.9, drops all the way to 57.1 the last 3 games. How about yards? 250 to 193. Yards per pass, 9.1 to 6.8. This is the big one. Touchdown to turnover ratio, 15-2 the first 5 games to 1-2 the last 3 games. And then the passer rating, 136.7, drops all the way to 71.5. So those are just the numbers behind what we have seen with our eyes. So they're talking about how big is this injury. Then Nick Wright, I wanted to show his take and I wanted us to react to it. He's trying to put this in like I'm not being mean. I'm not trying to be a Lamar hater, this and that. So he sure seems to be pushing that way, but I don't know. I'm not totally buying it myself. I want to get your thoughts. Here's Nick Wright on his theory of why these numbers just dropped this much. We can't ever just say, oh, it's just an injury. It always has to be something deeper. And here's Nick Wright.
I don't want this to be misconstrued, so I'm going to try to be very deliberate with what I say here. Because I think Lamar, remember, I did a couple years ago, maybe a year ago, the all-time Mahomes mountain. And I had Lamar somewhere in the 15 greatest quarterbacks ever. And there obviously have been quarterbacks that are dynamic with their legs that are just not good passers.
Right.
And that is not who Lamar is. With that said, I have thought for the last few years that the biggest Lamar fans in the analytics community and in a lot of writers, to be totally honest, that talk about him as a passer are watching a different player than me because they talk about how elite he is within the pocket, and that's true, and how precise he is, and that's somewhat true. And they talk about it as if it is divorced from his running. And I have never felt that way. I have felt that what has made Lamar so special is that because he is such a dynamic runner, you almost have to defend that first, which then has cleared the picture in passing, and he has improved in the passing from okay when he first came into the league to pretty good, and that made him have 40 touchdowns, 4 picks, all of these things. The last few years numbers have been unbelievable. He doesn't run anymore. Mm-hmm. And teams, I think, are realizing it. And for the first time, I believe, he is being defended like a mostly traditional quarterback. And I think he's struggling with it.
Okay. So his take here, Bobby, is that Lamar's difference in these numbers is because defenses now can maybe tee off against him the way you would against an immobile quarterback. And he's not an elite enough passer to overcome that. And so he's saying, yeah, you need to give him credit for having those legs, but those legs buy him more time. And so because they're defending him more aggressively and not worried that he'll escape, that's why the numbers are so different. What is your reaction to that take?
Probably not enough acknowledgement for my liking, just based on what he's dealt with over the last month plus, physically, first and foremost. And if it is indeed more about Lamar being unwilling to run versus unable to run, then that's a conversation for another time. But we have no reason to believe that. We have every reason to believe, based on injury reports, the way he's talking, the way John Harbaugh's been talking, right? And the way our eyes have been telling us, the way everybody's talking, is that it's a physical setback. So with that in mind, it's really hard to measure and evaluate him as a full-fledged quarterback, knowing that safety valve, as I referenced earlier on, isn't there for him, isn't there for the taking. It's what makes Lamar, his mobility and his growth as a passer, both outside the numbers, the intermediate game, you name it. vertical passing attack with Bateman and Zay now being a huge part of that has been instrumental. I mean, it's been phenomenal over the last couple of years. So I guess I kind of start there.
Yeah, so I think with what he's saying, there's some truth to it. It's that threat to be able to run is like we always talk about. Lamar Jackson always makes offensive linemen look better than they are, right? You put a different quarterback back there, and it's like you get a better gauge of who the offensive linemen are. And so I'm not saying that there's no truth. I mean, you buy yourself time. If somebody's like hesitant, should I come at you, or the way I would come at, a more statue guy that can't run. So there is some truth to it, but I think though it's still incomplete. And by being incomplete, you are robbing Lamar Jackson a little bit in his ability. And so, as I said before we had the preview with Marshall on this upcoming game, I said, I don't feel like enough people are talking about how the injury is just impacting mechanics, period. Exactly. You know what I mean? And so like, I wish that Nick Wright would he was like, yeah, he is elite in the pocket, but he's not as great as people are saying in terms of like how on point he is. Well, this can't be. We had a super chat a couple days ago. This to me is not an accurate read of how Lamar Jackson will look, say like when he's 35 and he doesn't have the wheels that he has today. You can't say, look at Lamar Jackson when he's had a hamstring and he's had an ankle and he's had a toe and he's had a knee, and that's the way he's going to look when he's 35. Like that's not the case. You can't draw that conclusion. But I think that's what Nick Wright is saying, but trying to be nice about it. Like, I don't want to be seen as what I'm saying is misconstrued, because I did put him on my Mahomes Mountain in the top 15. And so he's trying to like give more credit to Lamar than maybe he has in the past, but you're still stealing it a little bit, because you're leapfrogging. Like, take any statue quarterback, take him. If he is still dealing with a hamstring and then a knee and then an ankle and then a toe, Joe Burrow, right? I mean, he's got some mobility, but he's more of a traditional guy. And so it's like when his toe is off, is he going to be as accurate? And that's the thing, is people always jump. They leapfrog right over the idea that an injury could be impacting his passing also. And that this offensive line is terrible. Like, obviously Nick Wright's not watching all the games. There's no way he can. There's no way any of these national guys can. And so it's like, it's not just that, yes, he buys himself time with that elusiveness and that escapability, but it's also that the offensive line is terrible, especially up the middle. And then on top of it, no, he doesn't have that escapability. And then on top of that, he is injured and it is impacting his mechanics. And so it's always something deeper. It's always something deeper. It can't just be like, yeah, all those elements are making him inaccurate the way you would say for even a traditional quarterback. It's always jumping quicker to, well, he's still not as good of a passer. And it's because he can't buy himself the time and they're not as threatened anymore. Like, I'm just not buying that. I still think at 35, even though he's lost a step, Lamar will be more accurate than he's been over the last 3 weeks.
It's interesting. Big picture, Lamar will have to compensate for father time.
At some point, they all do.
But that time is not now.
It's not now.
You know what I mean? It's like the numbers on the screen obviously are staggering. And we know why, in large part, these numbers exist. And the dichotomy is real. Father time is not the reason as to why Lamar is not mobile and not scaring anybody with the ball in his hands as a ball carrier at the moment. It has everything to do about his physical setbacks that have had a cumulative effect. It has everything to do with an offensive line that is subpar and a guard play that really, from a front office standpoint, has failed from a 11-game body of work sample size so far into the second half of the season. And you can have other conversations about injuries and how that played a part throughout that period of time as well, because he wasn't the only one on the offensive side of the ball that was dealt with that. But that all of that, what he's going to have to come to terms with and figure out how to continue to evolve as his athleticism and the wear and tear, as any quarterback it deals with when you have the longevity and you play in the league. And guess what? All of a sudden, we're a year or two away from him being a decade into this league. So that will be coming at some point. That time is not now, though. So I think you and I are actually on the same page with this.
Okay, good.
I
Yeah,
hadn't watched
because
Nick's comments until now, so I'm processing them. I can't speak to whether or not I can't speak to his sincerity levels when it
Right.
comes to this. Obviously, he is a noted Chiefs fan. He speaks about it all the time. I'd like to think he's coming about this from a sincere standpoint, but in the past, there's been a lot left to be desired in that category when it comes to his commentary on Lamar.
yeah, and I don't even care whether it's sincere or not. It's just like, listen, he didn't want something to be misconstrued. If he had mentioned that injuries can impact mechanics, and if he had mentioned how horrible the offensive line is playing, and then he mentioned his point, then I'd be all bought in. But without mentioning those other two things, and you're leapfrogging straight to, oh, well, his legs, the threat of his legs is what really is showing that he's not as a good passer as he has been the last couple of years. If he had mentioned those other things, I would have been more bought in. But because he didn't, I'm not fully bought in.
I gotcha. There's one thing for sure. It's got to get better across the board right now offensively. And that does include Lamar. That includes his offensive line. That includes Todd Monken, who I thought Coach Evans did a great job of essentially paraphrasing. Like, you are, in a lot of ways, you are as good as your personnel is. And Todd's personnel, like, that's what has his disposal. It's not his responsibility to be a team builder, right? In the offseason, it's his front office's. Now, granted, that's not absolving Todd. We all know that he can be better and he can be more creative, particularly on first down carries and attempts for Derrick Henry and more red zone efficiency. And he's tried. He's trying. I mean, gosh, he's pulling out all the tricks, and there's got to be more, hopefully down the stretch as this 6 game begins. But, I'll just reference one more time, Sarah. This was earlier on, and I think, Mina Kimes dug deep on this one to kind of speak to where Lamar is really struggling uncharacteristically so as a passer. He's 32nd since returning. So what? That goes back to the Miami game. He's dead last on first read accuracy. So as a passer, he has not been sharp. There has not been a sharpness with the operation. That includes Tyler Linderbaum as his center. Their snaps, their cadence appears to have been off a little bit at times in that Jets game. And then when you couple that with some drops that have been untimely, particularly Mark Andrews in the red zone, in the end zone, I should say, and everything else that he's dealing with the lack of pass protection, it becomes a perfect storm. And that's where they are right now.